In the stillness of the night where shadows stretch long and secrets stir, we gather to unearth the truths that haunt us. Welcome to Shadows of the Past. Tonight, we tread into the heart of darkness, 10 true stories of crime, where love turns lethal, trust becomes betrayal, and the human soul reveals its most chilling depths. These are not tales of fiction, but echoes of lives lost, of choices made, of justice sought or denied. Lie back, let the darkness envelop you, but beware, the stories we tell are real, and their weight may linger long after the words fade. Let us begin. Part 1, The Lititz Murders, Cara, Bordon, and David Ludwig. In the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, lies Lititz, a town so quaint it seems lifted from a postcard. In 2005, its cobblestone streets and horse-drawn buggies carried the charm of a simpler time. The Amish farm stretched wide under open skies, and the air held the scent of fresh hay and baked bread. Families here lived quietly, bound by faith, community, and tradition. But beneath this idyllic surface, a tragedy was brewing, one that would tear through Lititz like a storm, leaving scars that time could not erase. Michael and Catherine Bordon were pillars of their small world. Devout Christians, they'd chosen Lititz as a sanctuary for their family of 5. Their 3 children, Cara, 14, and her younger siblings, aged 11 and 9, were raised in a home where faith was law. No television flickered in their living room, no internet connected them to the outside world. The Bordons homeschooled their children, shielding them from what they saw as the moral decay of modern life. Their days revolved around prayer, Bible study, and chores. To neighbors, they were a model of piety, a family untouched by the chaos of the 21st century. But perfection is a fragile facade. Cara Bordon was different. At 14, she was bright, curious, and restless. Her hazel eyes sparkled with a hunger for something more, a life beyond the rigid boundaries her parents had drawn. She loved music, though her parents forbade secular songs. She dreamed of friendships, of freedom, of a world she'd only glimpsed in stolen moments. To Michael and Catherine, Cara's restlessness was rebellion, a challenge to their authority. They tightened their grip, enforcing stricter rules, more prayers, longer hours of study. But the more they pushed, the further Cara drifted. And then she found David Ludwig. David was 18, the son of a respected family in the Bordon's church community. Tall, with a boyish smile and a quiet confidence, he was everything Cara wasn't allowed to want. They met at a youth group event, their eyes locking across a room filled with hymns and chaperones. To Cara, David was a spark in the darkness, a boy who saw her, who listened, who promised a world beyond her parents' walls. To David, Cara was a muse, a girl whose innocence and defiance stirred something deep within him. Their connection was instant, forbidden, and unstoppable. The Bordons were not blind. They noticed Cara's flushed cheeks, her secretive smiles, the way she lingered after church events. When they learned of her meetings with David, they were livid. Michael, a stern man with a booming voice, declared David too old, too worldly. Catherine, softer but no less resolute, wept for her daughter's soul. They forbade Cara from seeing him, grounding her indefinitely, confiscating her phone. But love, especially young love, is a force that defies bans. In the shadows, Cara and David's bond grew stronger. They exchanged notes, passed through trusted friends. They stole moments in church basements, their whispers drowned by organ music. David gave Cara a burner phone, a lifeline to their secret world. Late at night, when the Bordon house was silent, Cara would text David, pouring out her frustrations, her dreams, her longing. He promised her freedom, a future together. She believed it, but secrets, like embers, eventually ignite. On November 12, 2005, Michael Bordon made a discovery that would set the stage for horror. While cleaning Cara's room, he found the burner phone hidden beneath her mattress. The messages were unmistakable, intimate, defiant, a betrayal of everything the Bordon stood for. Furious, Michael confronted Cara that evening. The argument was explosive. Cara, tears streaming down her face, pleaded for understanding. Michael, his voice shaking with rage, called her a disgrace. Catherine stood by, silent but resolute, as they grounded Cara for good. No church events, no youth group, no David. That night, Cara texted David one last time. "They found it," she wrote. "I can't do this anymore." David's reply was simple. "We'll fix this. Together." What happened next would shock the nation. Sunday, November 13, 2005, dawned cold and gray in Lititz. The Bordon family was expected at church, their absence noted when the pews filled without them. Neighbors, accustomed to the family's punctuality, grew uneasy. By noon, a friend stopped by the Bordon home, knocking on the door. No answer. The windows were dark, the house unnaturally still. Concerned, the friend called police for a welfare check. When officers entered the Bordon home, they stepped into a nightmare. In the living room, Michael and Catherine lay sprawled on the floor, each killed by a single gunshot to the head. The wounds were precise, the work of someone who knew how to aim. Blood pooled beneath them, already drying in the morning chill. Upstairs, the younger Bordon children, trembling and wide-eyed, were found huddled in a closet. They whispered of a man with a gun, of screams, of Cara crying. Cara was gone. So was David Ludwig. Lititz erupted into chaos. A double murder in a town where crime was a stranger? The news spread like wildfire, drawing reporters from across the country. Police pieced together the timeline. David had entered the home early that morning, armed with a decapitated band. Michael, whatever. Michael LaBarre. The argument escalated, words turning to shouts, shouts to silence. 2 shots rang out, and the Bordon parents were dead. David didn't hesitate. He took Cara's hand and they fled. The younger children, spared but traumatized, could only watch as their sister vanished with the man who just destroyed their world. A nationwide manhunt began. David and Cara were spotted in David's red Volkswagen Jetta racing across Pennsylvania's back roads. Their faces dominated every news channel, their story a twisted mix of romance and violence. The media dubbed them a modern-day Bonnie and Clyde, but the truth was murkier. Was Cara a willing accomplice, driven by love to follow a killer? Or was she a victim, coerced by a man who just murdered her parents? For 28 hours, there were ghosts. Police tracked their movements through grainy gas station footage and witness reports. They crossed into Ohio, then Indiana, their path erratic, their destination unclear. David drove with a calm that unnerved Cara, who sat silently, her mind a storm of fear and loyalty. She loved him, didn't she? But the weight of what he'd done pressed against her, heavy and cold. Their run ended in Belleville, Indiana. A highway patrol officer spotted the Jetta, its plates flagged. A high-speed chase ensued, tires screeching through rural roads. David, realizing the futility, pulled over. He stepped out, hands raised, his face blank. Cara followed, pale and trembling, her eyes darting as if searching for escape. They were handcuffed, separated, and taken into custody. The nation watched, breathless as the story unfolded. In the interrogation room, the truth began to emerge. David was stoic, admitting to the murders with a chilling detachment. He claimed he'd acted alone, that Cara had no part in the planning. He'd gone to the Bordon home to talk, he said, but brought a gun just in case. When Michael lunged at him, he fired. Catherine, he claimed, was collateral damage. His story was clean, rehearsed, but his eyes betrayed no remorse. Cara's interrogation was different. She sat hunched, her voice barely above a whisper. She spoke of her parents' control, of feeling like a prisoner in her own home. David was her savior, she said, the only one who understood her. She hadn't known he'd bring a gun, hadn't expected the violence, but when the shots rang out, she froze. She didn't stop him, she didn't scream, she followed him, because what else could she do? The police were torn. Cara's youth, her sheltered upbringing, her tears, all pointed to manipulation. But her choice to flee with David, to stay silent as her parents bled out, raised questions. Was she a victim, or had she crossed a line into complicity? The trial became a national obsession. David Ludwig, now 19, faced 2 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. Prosecutors painted him as a predator, a man who killed to possess Cara, who saw her parents as obstacles to be removed. The defense argued he was a lovesick teenager driven to desperation by the Bordon's tyranny. But the evidence was damning. The gun, registered to David's father, the premeditated entry, the calculated flight. David took the stand, his voice flat, his answers rehearsed. He expressed regret, but it felt hollow, a performance for the jury. In 2006, the verdict came swiftly, guilty on both counts. David was sentenced to life without parole, his future sealed in a Pennsylvania prison. He showed no emotion as the gavel fell, his boyish charm replaced by a cold, empty stare. Cara's fate was different. Prosecutors, swayed by her age and the psychological hold David held over her, declined to charge her. She was placed in protective custody, later released to relatives in another state. The public was divided. Some saw her as a tragic figure, a girl brainwashed by love. Others saw a traitor, a daughter who'd abandoned her family in their final moments. Lititz struggled to heal. The Bordon home, once a beacon of faith, was sold, its new owners whispering of strange noises in the night. The church community shaken by the loss of Michael and Catherine grappled with guilt. Had they missed the signs? The younger Bordon children, raised by relatives, carried scars no child should bear. Cara disappeared from the public eye. Rumors swirled she'd changed her name, moved far away, started over. But could she ever escape the shadow of that November morning? David, behind bars, became a footnote, his name synonymous with betrayal. The questions linger, heavy and unresolved. What drives a teenager to stand by as her parents are gunned down? Was it love, so fierce it blinded her to right and wrong? Or was it something darker, a rebellion that spiraled into tragedy? The Bordons' strict upbringing had shielded their children from the world, but had it also pushed Cara toward the very chaos they feared? And what of David, a boy raised in faith, who turned to violence with such ease? In Lititz, the fields still stretch wide, the buggies still clatter down the roads. But the town is quieter now, its innocence tainted. The Bordon case is a wound that never fully healed, a reminder that even in the most devout homes, darkness can take root. And somewhere in the silence of a Pennsylvania night, the ghosts of Michael and Catherine Bordon still linger. They whisper to Cara, to David, to the town that failed them. They ask why. They ask for peace. But some questions, it seems, are destined to echo forever. Part 2, The Cleveland Strangler, Michael Madison. In the summer of 2013, East Cleveland, Ohio, was a place where hope seemed to flicker like a dying bulb. Once a thriving hub, the city had crumbled under the weight of poverty, decay, and neglect. Boarded-up houses lined the streets, their windows like empty eyes staring into nothingness. The air was thick with the hum of cicadas and the faint stench of rot, garbage, decay, something unplaceable. Residents moved through their days with a weary resilience, accustomed to hardship, to looking the other way. But in July of that year, something shifted. A smell fouler than usual seeped into the neighborhood, curling through cracked windows and open doors. It wasn't garbage. It wasn't an animal. It was something far worse. This is the story of Michael Madison, a man who walked among his neighbors unseen as the monster he was. This is the story of 3 women, Angela Diskins, Shatisha Sheila, and Sherelda Terry, whose lives were stolen in the shadows. This is the story of a city forced to confront the darkness it had ignored for too long. Michael Madison was born into a world that offered no kindness. His childhood in Cleveland was a crucible of pain, shaped by a mother lost to addiction and a father who was nothing more than a name. Neglect was his first teacher, violence his second. Neighbors recalled a boy who kept to himself, his eyes always watching, always calculating. By his teens, he learned to survive on the streets where cruelty was currency. But something in Michael didn't just survive, it festered. The abuse he endured, the abandonment, the indifference of the world around him, it all twisted into something dark, something hungry. By his 30s, Madison was a ghost in East Cleveland. He lived in a rundown apartment on Hayden Avenue, a squat, peeling building that blended into the neighborhood's decay. To those who passed him on the street, he was unremarkable. Average height, stocky build, a man who kept his head down and his words few. He worked odd jobs enough to scrape by, but his true occupation was predation. Michael Madison was a hunter, and his prey were the women society had forgotten. East Cleveland was a perfect hunting ground. The neighborhood was home to those on the margins, sex workers, addicts, the homeless, people who moved through life unseen, their disappearances often unnoticed. Madison knew this. He knew how to exploit the cracks in a broken system, how to lure the vulnerable with promises of money, drugs, or a warm place to sleep. He knew that no one would come looking. Angela Diskins was 38, a woman whose smile could light up a room even on her darkest days. She'd battled addiction, her life a cycle of struggle and fleeting hope. Sheila, 28, was a mother, her dreams of a better life buried under the weight of poverty. Sheila Terry, just 18, was a recent high school graduate, bright and ambitious, but caught in the neighborhood's pull. These women were daughters, sisters, friends. They were human. To Michael Madison, they were nothing. The horror began to unravel on July 19, 2013. A resident on Hayden Avenue called police, her voice trembling with disgust. The smell, she said, was unbearable. A rotting stench that clung to the air, seeping from a vacant lot near Madison's apartment. She thought it was a dead animal, but it was too strong, too persistent. Officers arrived, expecting a routine check. Instead, they found a scene that would haunt them for years. Hidden among the overgrown weeds, wrapped in black trash bags, was a body. The victim was Angela Deskins, her remains decomposing in the summer heat. She'd been strangled, her life extinguished with brutal force. The discovery sent shockwaves through the department. But before they could process the loss, another call came in. A second body, just yards away, Sheila, her fate mirroring Angela's. The bags were tied tightly, the disposal methodical, as if the killer wanted to erase their existence. The police cordoned off the lot, their faces grim. The neighborhood watched, whispers spreading like wildfire. A serial killer in East Cleveland? It seemed unthinkable, but the nightmare wasn't over. The next day, a third body was found, this time in a nearby alley. Sheila Terry, her young life snuffed out, her body discarded like refuse. The same trash bags, the same strangulation. The pattern was unmistakable. Michael Madison's name surfaced almost immediately. He lived steps from the lot, his apartment overlooking the grim discovery. Neighbors reported seeing women enter his building, their voices fading into silence. One woman, who had escaped Madison's grasp, came forward. She spoke of a man who'd offered her money, only to turn violent when she resisted. Her story was chilling, but it was the physical evidence that sealed his fate. Police stormed Madison's apartment on July 20, 2013. He was there, sitting calmly on a tattered couch, his expression unreadable. The officers expected resistance, panic, something. But Madison was eerily composed, his eyes cold, almost amused. "What took you so long?" he reportedly said, a smirk tugging at his lips. The search of his apartment revealed a house of horrors. Bloodstains, faint but unmistakable, dotted the walls. Restraints, tropes, chains, were tucked in a closet. Personal items later identified as belonging to the victims were scattered like trophies. The DNA evidence was damning. Traces of Angela, Sheila, and Sheila were found in the apartment. Hair, skin cells, blood. Madison's DNA, in turn, was linked to the trash bags, the crime scenes, the bodies. He'd been careful, but not careful enough. The science was unrelenting, and it pointed to one man. As Madison said in custody, the interrogation began. He was defiant, offering cryptic answers, taunting the detectives. "You think you know me," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You don't know anything." He admitted to knowing the women, claiming they'd come to him willingly. But the murders, he shrugged, his silence louder than any confession. The detectives pressed, their frustration mounting. Madison's calm was unnerving. A wall they couldn't breach. And the investigation widened. Police combed through missing persons reports, searching for others who might have crossed Madison's path. His criminal record, stretching back years, painted a picture of escalating violence, assaults, domestic abuse, a pattern of targeting women. He'd served time, but the system had let him slip through, releasing him back into a neighborhood too broken to notice. The trial in 2016 was a descent into darkness. The Cuyahoga County Courthouse was packed, the air heavy with grief and anger. Families of the victims filled the front rows, their faces etched with pain. Angela's sister clutched a photo of her smiling. Shetish's mother wept silently, her hands trembling. Sheila's father stared ahead, his jaw tight, as if holding back a scream. Prosecutors laid out a meticulous case. Madison, they argued, was a predator who killed for power, for pleasure. He lured his victims with lies, strangled them with his bare hands, and disposed of their bodies with chilling precision. The trash bags, they said, were a symbol of his contempt. He saw these women as garbage, unworthy of dignity. The evidence was overwhelming. The DNA, the witnesses, the items found in his apartment. A forensic psychologist testified to Madison's lack of empathy, describing him as a man who felt nothing for his victims, who saw their suffering as his right. Madison's defense was feeble. His attorneys argued he was a product of his environment, a man broken by a childhood of abuse. They pointed to his mother's addiction, his father's absence, the violence that shaped him. But the jury saw through the excuses. The man in the courtroom wasn't a victim. He was a monster. Madison himself was a study in arrogance. He sat shackled, his posture relaxed, his eyes scanning the room. When the victim's family spoke, he smirked, a gesture that sent ripples of outrage through the courtroom. During Sherelda's mother's tearful statement, he chuckled, prompting the judge to slam his gavel. "You will show respect," the judge barked. Madison's response, a slow, deliberate shrug. The prosecution played a recording obtained from a jailhouse informant. In it, Madison boasted of his crimes, his voice low and gleeful. "They didn't see it coming," he said. "Nobody did." He hinted at other victims, bodies the police hadn't found. The words hung in the air, a chilling promise that his evil might stretch further than anyone knew. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts, 3 counts of aggravated murder, kidnapping, corpse abuse, and a slew of lesser charges. The sentencing phase was tense. Ohio rarely imposed the death penalty, but the brutality of Madison's crimes demanded it. The families pleaded for justice, their voices raw with pain. "He took my baby," Sherelda's mother said, her voice breaking. "He doesn't deserve to breathe." On June 2, 2016, the judge delivered the sentence, death. Madison would spend his days on death row, his fate sealed in a concrete cell. As the gavel fell, he showed no reaction, his face a mask of indifference. The families wept, some with relief, others with the hollow realization that no sentence could bring their loved ones back. But the story of Michael Madison doesn't end with a verdict. In prison, his defiance grew. He wrote letters to true crime enthusiasts, boasting of his infamy, claiming he'd killed others, 5, 10, maybe more. "You'll never find them," he taunted in one letter, later leaked to the press. Investigators scrambled to verify his claims, revisiting cold cases, searching for patterns. A woman missing from 2011. A sex worker vanished in 2012. The leads were thin, the trails cold. How many more victims lay undiscovered? The question gnaws at East Cleveland, a wound that refuses to heal. The families of Angela, Shatisha, and Sherelda carry a different burden. They speak of their loved ones not as statistics, but as women with stories, with dreams. Angela, who loved to sing, her voice a comfort to her nieces. Shatisha, who wrote poetry, her words a glimpse of the life she hoped for. Sherelda, who planned to study nursing, her future stolen before it began. Their deaths forced East Cleveland to confront its blind spots, the poverty, the neglect, the systems that failed to protect the vulnerable. The lot on Hayden Avenue where the bodies were found is empty now. The weeds have been cleared, the trash bags long gone, but the ground feels different, heavier, as if it holds the weight of what happened. Residents pass by quickly, their eyes averted. Some say they hear whispers in the wind, faint cries that linger in the night. What makes a man like Michael Madison? Was it the cruelty of his childhood, the indifference of the world around him, or was something darker at work, something that no amount of understanding can explain? The psychologists offer theories, psychopathy, trauma, a need for control. But theories don't answer the why. They don't bring back Angela, Shatisha, or Sherelda. East Cleveland has changed since 2013. The city is rebuilding slowly, its streets a little cleaner, its spirit a little stronger, but the scars remain. The memory of 3 women discarded in trash bags is a reminder of what happens when a community looks away. Their names are spoken now, not as victims, but as lives that mattered. And Michael Madison? He sits on death row, his execution delayed by appeals, by the slow grind of justice. He writes his letters, plays his games, revels in the attention. But in the quiet of his cell, does he hear them? The voices of the women he silenced, the lives he stole? Or does he sleep soundly, untouched by the horrors he wrought? In East Cleveland, the nights are quieter now, but the shadows are long. They stretch across the lot, across the streets, across a city that will never forget. And in those shadows, the story of Michael Madison lingers. A warning that monsters don't always hide. Sometimes they walk among us, their darkness hidden in plain sight. Part 3. The Candyman, Ronald O'Brien. Pasadena, Texas, October 31, 1974. Halloween night, the streets were alive with the magic of childhood. Laughter echoing through the suburban sprawl. Flashlights bobbing like fireflies, and the rustle of candy wrappers filling the air. In this quiet working-class town just outside Houston, Halloween was a ritual of joy. Porches glowed with jack-o'-lanterns, neighbors competed to hand out the best treats, and children roamed in packs, their costumes a kaleidoscope of witches, superheroes, and ghosts. For 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien, it was the night he'd waited for all year. Clutching his plastic pumpkin bucket, his eyes wide with wonder, he darted from house to house. His 5-year-old sister, Elizabeth, trailing behind. Their father, Ronald O'Brien, watched closely, a smile plastered on his face. To the neighbors, he was a devoted dad, a man who worked hard and cherished his kids. But Ronald O'Brien was hiding a secret, and it was deadly. Ronald was 30, an optician with a steady job at a local eyewear shop. He and his wife, Daneen, had built a modest life in Pasadena, their 2 children the center of their world. On the surface, they were an ordinary family. Church-going, polite, the kind of people who blended into the fabric of their community. Ronald was known for his charm, his quick wit, his knack for making people laugh. He sang in the church choir, coached Little League, and always had a kind word for his neighbors. But beneath the facade, Ronald was drowning. Debt had become his shadow. Medical bills from a recent surgery, car payments, a mortgage they could barely afford. It all piled higher with each passing month. His job paid decently, but not enough to keep up. Creditors called relentlessly, their voices sharp through the phone. Daneen, a stay-at-home mom, didn't know the full extent, but she sensed the strain in Ronald's forced smiles, his late nights pacing the living room. He had taken out loans, maxed out credit cards, and still the hole grew deeper. But Ronald had a plan, a way out. It wasn't legal, it wasn't moral, it was monstrous. In early 1974, Ronald had quietly taken out life insurance policies on his children, $20,000, 0 cents on Timothy, another $20, 0 cents on Elizabeth. The premiums were a stretch, but he paid them diligently, telling Daneen it was for their future. The policies were a lifeline, a promise of financial salvation. There was just one catch. The money only paid out if the children died. Ronald began to research. At work, during lunch breaks, he'd ask odd questions, casual, almost offhand. Ever heard of cyanide? He'd say to a coworker, chuckling as if it were a joke. How much would it take to, do some damage? His colleagues brushed it off, thinking he was just being quirky. But Ronald was methodical. He visited libraries, flipping through chemistry books, jotting notes in a small pad he kept hidden. He learned that cyanide was fast, lethal, and nearly untraceable if you didn't know to look for it. He learned it could be bought discreetly from industrial suppliers, and he learned it could be mixed into something as innocent as candy. Halloween was the perfect cover. On that fateful night, Timothy and Elizabeth joined a group of neighborhood kids, including their friends from church. Ronald volunteered to chaperone, his demeanor cheerful as he herded the children through the streets. The group stopped at house after house, their buckets filling with Tootsie Rolls, Snickers, and Pixie Sticks, those colorful straws packed with sugary powder. At one home, on a dimly lit street, Ronald lagged behind, claiming the homeowner was slow to answer. When he rejoined the group, he held 5 Pixie Sticks, their ends stapled shut. "Got some extras," he said with a grin, handing one to Timothy, one to Elizabeth, and the rest to the other kids. No one thought twice. It was Halloween, after all. Back at the O'Brien house, the children dumped their candy onto the living room floor, sorting through their haul. Timothy, his blonde hair tousled, clutched his Pixie Sticks, excited to try the tart powder. Ronald encouraged him, his voice warm but insistent. "Go on, Timmy," he said, ruffling his son's hair. "Try it, it's your favorite." Elizabeth, distracted by a chocolate bar, set hers aside. The other kids had already gone home, their Pixie Sticks tucked into their bucket. Timothy tore open the straw and poured the powder into his mouth. He winced, his face scrunching. "It tastes bad," he mumbled, spitting some out. Ronald's smile faltered, but he pressed. "Swallow it, son, it's just a different flavor." Timothy tried again, but within seconds he was gagging, clutching his stomach. He stumbled, his small body convulsing, foam forming at his lips. Daneen screamed, rushing to him. Ronald stood frozen, his eyes wide as if stunned. By the time paramedics arrived, Timothy was still, his heart had stopped. He was gone. The hospital was chaos. Doctors worked frantically, but it was too late. Daneen collapsed sobbing, her world shattered. Ronald played the grieving father, his face pale, his hands trembling. "It must have been the candy," he whispered to police, his voice breaking. "Someone poisoned my boy." Pasadena reeled. A child poisoned on Halloween? The news spread like wildfire, igniting panic. Parents dumped their children's candy into trash cans, fearing a madman targeting trick-or-treaters. Schools sent home warnings. Churches held prayer vigils. The media descended, cameras flashing as reporters speculated about a deranged killer loose in the suburbs. Ronald fueled the hysteria, tearfully recounting how a stranger at one of the houses had handed out the pixie sticks. He pointed police to a specific home on Donnerell Street, describing a shadowy figure who lingered at the door. But the story didn't hold. The homeowner, a man named Courtney Melvin, had an airtight alibi. He'd been at work miles away with dozens of witnesses. His wife confirmed they'd run out of candy early that night, closing their door by 8 p.m. No one else in the neighborhood reported suspicious activity. And then a chilling detail emerged. None of the other children who'd received pixie sticks had eaten them. Miraculously, they'd been spared, their candy untouched or discarded. Police tested the remaining straws. Each contained enough cyanide to kill an adult, let alone a child. Suspicion turned to Ronald. Investigators dug into his life, and the cracks in his facade widened. They found the insurance policies taken out just months before Timothy's death. They uncovered his debts, over $100,000, 0 cents, a fortune in 1974. Co-workers came forward, recalling Ronald's strange questions about cyanide. A chemical supplier confirmed he'd purchased a small quantity of potassium cyanide, claiming it was for cleaning equipment. Receipts, own records, and witness statements painted a damning picture. Ronald hadn't just poisoned Timothy, he'd planned to kill other children, including his own daughter, to deflect suspicion and collect multiple payouts. The arrest came on November 5th, 1974. Police swarmed the O'Brien home, cuffing Ronald as Dainine watched, her face a mask of disbelief. "Why?" she whispered, clutching Elizabeth. Ronald said nothing, his eyes distant as he was led away. The town that had mourned with him now turned against him. Neighbors who'd called him friend spat his name. Churchgoers who'd sung beside him prayed for his soul and for justice. The trial in 1975 was a media circus. The Harris County courthouse was packed, the air thick with tension. Ronald, dubbed the Candyman by the press, sat stone-faced, his once charming demeanor replaced by a cold, calculated silence. Prosecutors laid bare his betrayal piece by meticulous piece. The cyanide purchased weeks before Halloween. The insurance policies signed in secret. The pixie sticks carefully laced and stapled shut. Witnesses testified to Ronald's financial desperation, his boasts about getting rich soon. A chemist explained the poison's brutality. Cyanide starves the body of oxygen, causing agony in minutes. The most heartbreaking testimony came from Dainine. She took the stand, her voice trembling, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She spoke of Timothy, his love for baseball, his shy smile. The way he'd hug her before bed. She spoke of Ronald, the man she trusted, who'd kissed her goodnight while plotting to kill their son. "I loved him," she said, her voice breaking. "How could he do this?" The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words crushing. Ronald's defense was desperate. His attorneys argued he was framed, that someone else had poisoned the candy. They pointed to the lack of direct evidence. No one saw Ronald lace the pixie sticks. No fingerprints tied him to the poison. But the jury wasn't swayed. The paper trail, the motive, the lies. It all pointed to one man. The most damning moment came when a co-worker testified to a chilling conversation. Weeks before Halloween, Ronald had joked about life insurance, saying, "If something happened to the kids, I'd be set for life." The co-worker had laughed, thinking it was gallows humor. Now, the words echoed like a confession. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty of capital murder. The sentencing phase was swift. Prosecutors argued Ronald's crime was unforgivable. A father who'd betrayed the sacred bond of parenthood for money. The defense pleaded for mercy, citing his clean record, his community ties. But the jury saw no redemption. On June 3rd, 1975, Ronald O'Brien was sentenced to death. Pasadena exhaled, but the relief was fleeting. The town's innocence had been shattered. Halloween, once a night of joy, became a night of fear. Parents checked every piece of candy, their trust in neighbors replaced by suspicion. The media frenzy grew, with headlines screaming about the Halloween killer. Urban legends sprang up. Tales of razor blades and apples, poison and sweets, myths rooted in the very real horror of Ronald. Ronald spent 9 years on death row at the Ellis unit in Huntsville, Texas. He maintained his innocence, writing letters to newspapers, claiming he'd been railroaded by a vengeful system. He found religion, or so he said, quoting Bible verses to anyone who'd listen, but those who knew him saw through the act. His eyes, once warm, were now cold, his charm a hollow shell. On March 21, 1984, Ronald faced his execution as he was strapped to the gurney, lethal injection prepared. He offered no apology, no remorse. His final words were defiant, a cryptic jab at his accusers. What is about to transpire is wrong, but I forgive you. The needle went in. Within minutes, he was gone. Outside the prison, a crowd had gathered, some cheering, others silent. Timothy's death had left a wound that no execution could heal. Daneen, now raising Elizabeth alone, stayed away. She'd divorced Ronald, changed her last name, and tried to rebuild. But the memories lingered. Timothy's laughter, his small hand in hers, the night that changed everything. Elizabeth, just 5 when her brother died, grew up in the shadow of her father's crime. She was 15 at the time of the execution, old enough to understand, young enough to be haunted. She rarely spoke of Ronald, but those close to her said she carried a quiet anger, a grief that never faded. Pasadena tried to move on. The house on Donerail Street was sold, its new owners whispering of strange feelings in the halls. The church where Ronald sang closed its doors, its congregation scattered. Halloween returned, but it was different. Parents hovered closer. Candy was inspected with a scrutiny that felt foreign in a town once so trusting. The legacy of Ronald O'Brien is a stain on Pasadena's history. His crime gave birth to the modern Halloween panic, the fear of tampered treats that persists to this day. But beyond the myths, beyond the headlines, is the story of a boy. Timothy O'Brien loved superheroes, baseball cards, and the thrill of Halloween. He trusted his father, as all children do. That trust was his undoing. What drives a man to kill his own child for money? Greed, so consuming it blinded him to love. Desperation, so deep it erased his humanity. Or something colder, something that defies reason. Ronald O'Brien took those answers to his grave. Psychologists point to narcissism, to a man who saw his children as pawns, not people. But explanations don't soothe the pain. They don't bring back Timothy. In Pasadena, the streets are quieter now, the jack-o'-lanterns fewer, the children still trick-or-treat, but the magic is tempered by memory. The O'Brien case is a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil doesn't always lurk in dark alleys. Sometimes it smiles at you across the dinner table. Sometimes it tucks you in at night. And somewhere in the stillness of a Texas autumn, Timothy's laughter echoes. It's faint, drowned by the wind, but it's there. A reminder of a life stolen, a boy who deserved better, a father who chose betrayal over love. The Candyman is gone, but his shadow remains. A warning that the sweetest moments can hide the bitterest truths. Why 4? The Forest Park killer, Todd Allen Reed. Portland, Oregon, 1999. Forest Park stretches across the city's western edge like a green cathedral. Its 5,000 acres, a tapestry of towering Douglas firs, fern-choked ravines, and winding trails. To locals, it's a sanctuary, a place to hike, to breathe, to escape the hum of urban life. The park's vastness feels timeless, its shadows deep and inviting. But in the late 1990s, those shadows hid a predator. For some, Forest Park became a graveyard, its beauty a cruel mask for the horrors within. This is the story of Todd Allen Reed, a man whose darkness turned a haven into a hunting ground. This is the story of 3 women, Lila M. Ware, Stephanie Lynn Russell, and Alexandria Eisen, whose lives were stolen in the silence of the woods. This is the story of a city forced to confront the evil that walked its trails. Todd Reed was a shadow himself, a man who moved through life unnoticed. Born in 1965, he grew up in Portland's working-class neighborhoods, his childhood unremarkable to those who knew him. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. Reed was a loner, his interactions marked by an unsettling intensity. By his 20s, he'd racked up a criminal record, petty theft, assaults, a pattern of violence that hinted at deeper impulses. In 1992, he was convicted of sexual assault, a crime that branded him a registered sex offender. The system sentenced him to prison, then released him back into the world, assuming he'd been rehabilitated. They were wrong. By 1999, Reed was 34, drifting through Portland's underbelly. He lived in cheap apartments, worked sporadic jobs, construction, dishwashing, anything that paid cash. He blended into the city's transient community, a face you'd pass without a second glance. But Reed was a predator, his urges honed by years of resentment and entitlement. He knew Forest Park well, its secluded paths, its hidden clearings, the places where screams would be swallowed by the tree. He knew it was a place where the vulnerable could vanish. Lila M. Ware was 34, a woman whose life had been a battle against the odds. Homeless, struggling with addiction, she moved through Portland's shelters and street corners, her warm laugh a fleeting reminder of the person she'd once been. Stephanie Lynn Russell, 26, was a dreamer, her journals filled with plans to start over, though poverty and trauma kept her tethered to the margins. Alexandria Eisen, 22, was a free spirit, her love for music and art overshadowed by the chaos of addiction. These women were invisible to most, their struggles dismissed by a society quick to judge. To Todd Reed, they were perfect targets. The horror began to unfold in April 1999. A hiker deep in Forest Park's northwest corner stumbled across a shallow grave. The earth was disturbed, freshly turned, as if someone had been in a hurry. Police arrived, their boots sinking into the damp soil. They uncovered the body of Lila Ware, her remains battered, her life extinguished by strangulation. The scene was grim, her clothes torn, her body partially covered by leaves, a hasty attempt to hide the crime. The discovery sent ripples through Portland. A murder in Forest Park? The park was a refuge, not a crime scene. Investigators combed the area, but the trail was cold. Lila's life on the streets meant few witnesses, no clear connections. Her death was mourned by the homeless community, but to the broader city, it was a tragedy quickly forgotten. Police suspected a transient killer, someone passing through, but they didn't know the killer was already hunting again. In July 1999, another body was found, this time near a remote trailhead. Stephanie Russell, her body hidden beneath a pile of branches, had been strangled, her death mirroring Lila's. The similarities were unmistakable. Both women homeless, both killed with brutal force, both left in shallow graves. Portland's media took notice, headlines screaming about a possible serial killer. Hikers grew wary, their morning jogs tinged with unease. Police doubled patrols, but Forest Park's vastness was a challenge. The killer could strike anywhere, vanish into the trees, and leave no trace. The third discovery came in September 1999. Alexandria Eisen's body was found deeper in the park, her grave more carefully concealed. She'd been strangled, her body wrapped in a tarp. A sign the killer was growing bolder, more meticulous. The city was gripped by fear. 3 women, all vulnerable, all killed in the same brutal way. The public demanded answers. Was this the work of one man? And if so, how was he slipping through the cracks? Police were stumped. The victims had little in common beyond their circumstances. Homeless, female, struggling. No witnesses came forward. No security cameras captured the park's entrances. The killer was a ghost, his methods precise, his motives unclear. Detectives canvassed shelters, interviewed street dwellers, but the leads were thin. The case seemed destined to go cold, another tragedy swallowed by the city's indifference. But then, a break. During a second sweep of Stephanie Russell's crime scene, investigators found a discarded condom half buried in the dirt. It was a long shot, but they sent it for DNA analysis. At the time, DNA technology was still evolving, its use in criminal cases limited by cost and time. But Portland's lab was persistent. Weeks later, the results came back. A match to Todd Allen Reed, a registered sex offender whose DNA was on file from his 1992 conviction. Reed became the prime suspect. Police tracked him to a rundown apartment in North Portland, a cluttered space that reeked of cigarette smoke and neglect. When they knocked, Reed answered calmly, his face betraying no panic. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice flat. The officers noted his composure, the way his eyes flicked to the door, as if calculating his odds. They arrested him on a parole violation, buying time to build their case. The search of Reed's apartment was a descent into darkness. Investigators found a map of Forest Park, its trails marked with red ink, some circling the exact locations where the bodies were found. They uncovered women's clothing, scarves, a bracelet, a torn jacket, later identified as belonging to the victims. A rope stained with blood was tucked under a mattress. The evidence was circumstantial but chilling, a glimpse into a mind that saw murder as a craft. He now became the linchpin. Traces of Lila, Stephanie, and Alexandria were found in Reed's apartment. Hair, skin cells, blood. His DNA, in turn, was linked to the condom, the tarp, and a cigarette butt near Alexandria's grave. The science was unrelenting. A net closing around a man who thought himself untouchable. In interrogation, Reed was a study in defiance. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his lips curled in a faint smirk. "You've got nothing," he said, his voice low and taunting. Detectives laid out the evidence, the DNA, the map, the clothing. Reed's smirk faded, but he didn't crack. He admitted to knowing the women, claiming they'd been friends, who'd visited his apartment. The murders? He shrugged, his silence a wall. "Prove it," he said, his eyes cold. But the proof was overwhelming. Faced with the inevitability of a trial, Reed's bravado crumbled. In 2001, he agreed to a plea deal, sparing the families the agony of a public spectacle. He confessed to 3 counts of aggravated murder, detailing his crimes with a detachment that chilled the room. He lured the women to Forest Park, promising drugs or money. Once alone, he attacked, strangling them with his hands or a rope, his rage unleashed in brutal, methodical assaults. He buried them hastily, assuming the park's vastness would keep his secrets. The sentencing was swift. 3 consecutive life sentences, no possibility of parole. Reed stood impassive as the judge spoke, his eyes fixed on the floor. He offered no apology, no explanation. To him, the women were objects, their lives meaningless. As he was led away, one of Stephanie's friends shouted, "You'll rot for this!" Reed didn't flinch. The families of Lila, Stephanie, and Alexandria sat through the hearings, their grief a quiet force. Lila's sister spoke of her laughter, her love for old jazz records. Stephanie's mother clutched a photo of her daughter smiling, a reminder of the future she'd never have. Alexandria's best friend, a young artist, described her sketches, vibrant drawings that captured a world she'd hoped to escape. These women were more than their struggles. They were daughters, sisters, dreamers. Their deaths sparked outrage, exposing Portland's failure to protect its most vulnerable. Reed's conviction brought relief, but not closure. Police suspected he was linked to other disappearances, women who'd vanished from Portland's streets in the late 1990s. A 1997 case, a 1998 missing person report, both bore similarities to Reed's methods, but the evidence was thin. Detectives interviewed him again, hoping for a confession. But Reed was cold. "Maybe I did, maybe I didn't," he said, a smirk returning. The cases remain open, their files gathering dust, their families left to wonder. Forest Park has changed since 1999. The trails are busier now, the city more vigilant. Signs warn hikers to stay in groups, to report suspicious behavior. But the park's beauty is tainted, its silence heavier. Locals speak of the Forest Park killer in hushed tones, a ghost story rooted in truth. Some claim they feel watched on certain trails, their footsteps quickening as the trees close in. The broader impact of Reed's crimes lingers. Portland's homeless community, already marginalized, face increased scrutiny, their plight dismissed as self-inflicted. Activists pushed for better services, shelters, addiction programs, safety nets to protect the vulnerable. The city listened slowly, but the progress feels hollow to those who knew Lila, Stephanie, and Alexandria. Their deaths were a wake-up call, but one that came too late. What makes a man like Todd Reed? Was it power, the thrill of control over those society ignored? Was it hatred, a rage against women who reminded him of his own failures? Or was it opportunity, a predator exploiting a city's blind spots? Psychologists point to psychopathy, to a man wired to feel nothing for his victims, but labels don't answer the why. They don't erase the graves in Forest Park. Reed remains in prison, his days spent in a concrete cell at the Oregon State Penitentiary. He's faded from the headlines, his name a footnote in Portland's history, but for the families, he's a wound that never heals. They visit the park sometimes, leaving flowers near the trails where their loved ones were found. The flowers wilt, but the memories endure. Lila's laugh, Stephanie's dreams, Alexandria's art. In Portland, the seasons turn, the rains fall, and Forest Park stands as it always has, vast, beautiful, eternal, but its shadows are deeper now, its silence less comforting. The story of Todd Reed is a reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it walks the trails you love, its footsteps soft, its darkness hidden, until it's too late. And somewhere in the quiet of the park's heart, the spirits of Lila, Stephanie, and Alexandria linger. They whisper through the trees, their voices faint but unbroken. They ask to be remembered. They ask for justice. They ask why a man chose to make their sanctuary his killing ground. Part 5, Princess Doe, Dawn Olanick. Blairstown, New Jersey, July 15th, 1982. The summer evening was warm, the air thick with the scent of pine and wildflowers. Cedar Ridge Cemetery, perched on the edge of town, was a place of quiet reverence, its weathered headstones standing sentinel over rolling hills. The small community of Blairstown, nestled in the shadow of the Delaware Water Gap, was the kind of place where doors stayed unlocked, where neighbors knew each other's name. It was a town that felt safe, untouched by the chaos of the wider world. But on that fateful evening, a groundskeeper tending the cemetery stumbled across a discovery that would shatter that illusion forever. Hidden among the tall grass, near a cluster of ancient oaks, was the body of a young woman. She was unrecognizable, her face battered beyond identification, her life extinguished with savage brutality. The scene was a violation of the cemetery's peace, a place meant for rest, now stained with violence. The girl, barely more than a teenager, became known as Princess Doe, a name coined by police to give dignity to the unknown. For 40 years, her identity remained a mystery, her story a wound that refused to heal. This is the story of Dawn Olanick, the girl behind the name. This is the story of a town haunted by her loss and a killer who thought he'd escaped justice. This is the story of a case that proved even the coldest mysteries can find answers in time. The discovery of Princess Doe sent shockwaves through Blairstown. The town, with its population of just 5,000, had never seen such a crime. Murders were rare, violent ones unheard of. The groundskeeper, a grizzled man named Earl, called police in a trembling voice, his hands shaking as he described the scene. "She's just a kid," he said, his words heavy with disbelief. Who would do this? When officers arrived, they were struck by the brutality. The girl's body bore the marks of a frenzied attack, blunt force trauma to her head, her face so disfigured it was impossible to sketch her likeness. She'd been beaten with a heavy object, perhaps a rock or a pipe. The blows relentless, personal. Her clothes offered little insight. A red nylon skirt, a peasant-style blouse with a floral pattern, a cheap gold cross necklace, no wallet, no ID, no personal belongings. Her body had been left exposed, as if the killer wanted her found, a grim message to the world. The autopsy revealed more horrors. She was estimated to be between 14 and 20 years old, petite with light brown hair. She'd been dead for days, maybe a week, the summer heat accelerating decomposition. The cause of death was clear, massive head trauma, but there were signs of a struggle. Defensive wounds on her arms, bruises on her wrists. She'd fought back fiercely against an attacker who showed no mercy. Blairstown recoiled. Who was she? A local girl, gone unnoticed? A runaway, passing through? The police launched a desperate search for answers, plastering sketches and descriptions across New Jersey and beyond. The name Princess Doe caught the media's attention, its poignancy drawing national coverage. Tips poured in, sightings of girls matching her description, reports of missing teens from nearby states. But each lead fizzled, each hope dashed. The girl remained a ghost, her face a blank space in the public's imagination. The community rallied, their grief tinged with guilt. How had a girl so young ended up in their cemetery, alone and broken? They raised funds for a proper burial, laying her to rest in Cedar Ridge under a simple headstone inscribed with Princess Doe. Hundreds attended the funeral, strangers united by a shared sorrow. "She's our daughter now," the town's mayor said, his voice cracking. But the gesture, however heartfelt, couldn't answer the question that haunted them. Who was she? Investigators worked tirelessly. They canvassed Blairstown, knocking on every door, interviewing residents who'd been near the cemetery that week. They traced the clothing, hoping the skirt or blouse might lead to a store or purchase a clue. The necklace, a mass-produced trinket, was a dead end. Dental records were checked against missing persons reports, but without a name. the comparisons were futile. The case grew colder with each passing month, the files piling up, the detective's frustration mounting. Theories abounded. Was she a runaway, fleeing an abusive home? A hitchhiker, picked up by the wrong person? Some whispered of a serial killer, a predator stalking the rural highways of the Northeast. Others believed she was local, her family too ashamed or estranged to report her missing. The lack of answers fueled speculation, turning Princess Doe into a legend, a tragic figure whose story was equal parts mystery and heartbreak. Years turned to decades. The 1980S gave way to the 1990S, then the 2000S. Blairstown changed. New homes sprouted, the population grew, but the memory of Princess Doe endured. The cemetery became a pilgrimage site for true crime enthusiasts who left flowers and notes at her grave. Detectives retired, passing the case to younger officers, each vowing to solve it. Technology advanced, DNA profiling, digital databases, but the girl's identity remained elusive. Her body exhumed in the 1990S for further testing yielded no breakthroughs. Princess Doe seemed destined to remain a question mark, a case that defied resolution. But science, like time, is patient. In the early 2010s, a new tool emerged, genetic genealogy. By cross-referencing DNA with public ancestry databases, investigators could build family trees, tracing identities through distant relatives. The technique had cracked high-profile cases like the Golden State Killer and offered hope for cold cases like Princess Doe. In 2021, the Warren County Prosecutor's Office partnered with a private lab determined to give the girl her name. The process was painstaking. DNA from the body, preserved despite decades in the ground, was extracted and uploaded to genealogy platforms. Researchers sifted through matches, building a web of cousins, aunts, and grandparents. Slowly, a picture emerged. The girl was likely from the Northeast, her family scattered across New York and New Jersey. By early 2022, the net tightened. A close relative unaware of the case provided a DNA sample. The match was undeniable. Her name was Dawn Olanick. Dawn was 17 when she died, a runaway from Long Island, New York. Born in 1965, she'd grown up in a turbulent home. Her parents divorced, leaving scars that never healed. By her teens, Dawn was rebellious, her spirit too big for the confines of her small town. She loved music, Fleetwood Mac, David Bowie, and dreamed of a life beyond the strip malls and cul-de-sacs of suburbia. In 1981, she left home, telling friends she was starting over. Her family, estranged and fractured, assumed she'd run off to the city, maybe found a new life. They didn't report her missing, a decision that would haunt them. The revelation of Dawn's identity was bittersweet. Her family, notified in 2022, was devastated. "We thought she was out there living," her older sister said, tears in her voice. "We never imagined this," Dawn's mother, long remarried, collapsed when told. Her guilt, a weight she'd carry to her grave. The public, too, grappled with the news. Princess Doe was no longer a symbol. She was a girl, with a name, a story, a life, cut short. But identifying Dawn was only half the battle. Who killed her? Number 9. Investigators revisited the case with fresh eyes. Dawn's life as a runaway put her in vulnerable circles. Hitchhikers, drifters, predators who preyed on the lost. Police traced her movements, piecing together a hazy timeline. She'd been seen in New York City in early 1982, crashing with friends, working odd jobs. By spring, she was in New Jersey, possibly heading west. Her path crossed with a man named Arthur Kinlaw, a name that would soon become infamous. Kinlaw was a career criminal, a convicted killer serving life for unrelated murders in New York. In 1982, he was 34, a drifter with a rap sheet stretching back to his teens, assaults, robberies, and a chilling history of violence against women. He was charming when he needed to be, his smooth talk a lure for those desperate for help. In 2022, as Dawn's identity came to light, detectives re-examined Kinlaw's past. But he'd been in New Jersey that summer, his presence documented in police reports from petty crimes. Tip from a former cellmate broke the case open. Kinlaw, now in his 70s, had bragged about killing a girl in a cemetery, describing details only the killer would know. The red skirt, the oak trees, the ferocity of the attack. "She fought like hell," he'd said, laughing. Detectives confronted him in prison, his frail frame a stark contrast to the monster of 1982. Faced with DNA evidence linking him to Dawn's clothing, Kinlaw confessed. His story was chilling. He'd met Dawn in New York, a chance encounter at a bus station. She was hitchhiking, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes wary but hopeful. Kinlaw offered her a ride, promising to take her to a friend's place in New Jersey. Along the way, he made advances, his charm turning to menace. Dawn resisted, her defiance enraging him. In a secluded stretch near Blairstown, he pulled over, dragging her into the cemetery. When she fought back, scratching and screaming, he snapped. He beat her with a rock, his rage unrelenting until she was still. He left her there, under the oaks, and drove away, assuming no one would care about a runaway. Kinlaw was charged with murder in 2022, his trial a formality. At 74, he'd never leave prison, his life sentence extended by Dawn's death. He showed no remorse, his confession laced with a twisted pride. "She shouldn't have fought," he said, his voice raspy. The courtroom recoiled, the judge's gavel a sharp rebuke. Dawn's family attended the hearings, their faces etched with pain. Her sister spoke of the girl she'd known, Dawn's love for drawing, her habit of singing off-key, her stubborn hope for a better life. She was more than a victim, she said, her voice steady despite tears. She was ours. The trial brought closure but not peace. Knowing who killed Dawn didn't erase the decades of wondering, the guilt of not searching harder. But downtown has changed since 1982. The cemetery, once a place of solace, is now a landmark for true crime pilgrims who leave tokens at Dawn's grave. Flowers, candles, notes addressed to Princess Doe. The town is larger now, its rural charm tempered by time, but the memory of that summer lingers. Residents speak of Dawn with a quiet reverence, her story a reminder of the fragility of safety, the cost of overlooking the lost. Doe case. The Princess Doe case is a testament to persistence. It took 40 years, countless investigators, and a revolution in science to give Dawn her name. Genetic genealogy, once a niche tool, is now a beacon for cold cases, offering hope to families still searching, but the victory is hollow for those who love Dawn. Her life was stolen before it could bloom, her dreams buried in a cemetery far from home. Responsibly rage has raised Americans. What drove Arthur Kinlaw to such violence? Was it rage, sparked by a girl who dared to fight back? Was it power, the thrill of dominating someone society ignored? Or was it simply who he was? A man wired for destruction. Psychologists point to psychopathy, to a life shaped by violence and entitlement. But labels don't explain the why. They don't bring back Dawn. The broader impact of the case resonates. Dawn's story exposed the plight of runaways, young people who slipped through the cracks, their disappearances often dismissed. Advocacy groups in New Jersey push for better systems, hotlines, shelters, databases to track missing teens. The changes came slowly, but they bear Dawn's name, a legacy born of loss. In Blairstown, the seasons turn, the oaks and Cedar Ridge grow taller, the branches casting long shadows over Dawn's grave. The cemetery is quiet now, its peace restored, but it feels different, heavier, as if the ground holds the weight of her story. Visitors pause at her headstone, some whispering prayers, others simply standing in silence. And what of Dawn? In the fragments of her life, we see a girl who refused to be broken. She ran toward freedom, toward possibility, even as the world turned against her. Her fight, however brief, was a spark that burned bright. Her name, reclaimed after decades, is a victory over the darkness that tried to erase her, but the questions linger, soft and insistent. Why did no one look for her? Why did it take so long to find her? And what if the other princess does, the unnamed souls still waiting for their truth? In the stillness of a New Jersey night, Dawn's spirit seems to whisper, her voice carried by the wind. She asks to be remembered. She asks for justice. She asks why a world so full of light could let her fall into shadow. Part 6, The Wrong Man. Jane Anker Hilton. El Dorado Hills, California, August 1985. The sun hung low over the Sacramento Valley, casting golden light across a suburb that seemed plucked from a dream. Tidy lawns stretched before ranch-style homes, children rode bikes down quiet streets, and neighbors waved from their porches. El Dorado Hills was a haven, a place where families fled the chaos of city life for safety and serenity. Crime was a stranger here, the kind of thing that happened somewhere else. But on a warm summer evening, that illusion shattered, leaving a community to grapple with loss, betrayal, and a justice system that failed. This is the story of Jane Anker Hilton, a woman whose kindness lit up the lives around her. This is the story of Ricky Davis, a man who paid for a crime he didn't commit. This is the story of a truth buried for decades, unearthed by persistence and the unrelenting march of science. Jane Anker Hilton was 32, a mother and a housekeeper whose warmth was as much a part of her as her smile. She worked for the Hazelms family, a wealthy couple who lived in a sprawling home on the edge of El Dorado Hills. Jane was more than an employee. She was a confidant, a friend, the kind of person who remembered birthdays and listened without judgment. Her days were spent tidying the Hazelms' home, her evenings devoted to her young daughter, who was her world. Jane's life wasn't lavish, but it was full of love, of purpose, of quiet joy. On August 11th, 1985, Jane arrived at the Haslam residence, as usual, her keys jangling as she let herself in. The house was empty. The Haslams away on vacation. She moved through her routine, dusting, vacuuming, folding linens, her humming a soft counterpoint to the summer breeze. But as the day faded into dusk, something went horribly wrong. When the Haslams returned the next morning, they found a scene that would haunt them forever. Jane lay on the living room floor, her body surrounded by a halo of blood. She'd been stabbed 29 times, the wounds a frenzy of rage. Slashes to her chest, her arms, her neck. A bite mark deep and jagged marred her shoulder, a chilling signature of her attacker's fury. The room was in disarray, furniture overturned, blood smeared on the walls. Jane had fought, her nails broken, her hands bruised from warding off the blade. Her strength was no match for the violence that consumed her. El Dorado Hills reeled. A murder in their idyllic suburb? The news spread like wildfire, shattering the community's sense of safety. Doors that once stayed unlocked were bolted. Parents kept their children close, and whispers of fear replaced friendly greetings. Jane's death was personal. She wasn't a stranger, but a neighbor, a mother, a woman whose absence left a void. Her daughter, just 9 years old, was left in the care of relatives, her world upended by a loss she couldn't comprehend. Police descended on the Hazelm home, their faces grim as they processed the scene. The brutality suggested a personal motive, someone who knew Jane, who harbored a grudge or a twisted obsession, but there were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no murder weapon. The bite mark was a promising lead, but forensic autopsy was in its infancy and the technology to analyze it was limited. Investigators canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing anyone who'd seen Jane that day. A few reported a young man loitering near the Hazel property, but the descriptions were vague, the sightings unconfirmed. The pressure to solve the case was immense. El Dorado Hills demanded answers, the media hounding police for updates. With no clear suspects, detectives turned to the fringes of Jane's life. They questioned her ex-husband, her co-workers, even the Haslams, but each lead fizzled. Months passed, the case growing colder, the community's fear giving way to frustration. Jane's family, grieving and desperate, pleaded for justice. "Someone knows something," her sister said at a vigil, her voice breaking. "Please, come forward." In 1999, a break seemed to come. Ricky Davis, a 35-year-old local with a minor criminal record, was brought in for questioning. Davis had lived in El Dorado Hills in 1985, his name surfacing after a tip from his girlfriend, Connie Dahl. Connie, a troubled woman with a history of drug use, claimed Davis had confessed to her years earlier, describing details of Jane's murder. Only the killer would know. Under intense pressure from police, Connie's story wavered, but it was enough to build a case. Boone Davis was an easy target. His rap sheet included petty theft and a bar fight, painting him as a drifter with a temper. He had been seen near the Hazelm home in 1985, though no one could place him there the day of the murder. His alibi was shaky. He claimed he'd been drinking with friends, but no one corroborated his story. Detectives leaned hard, interrogating him for hours, their questions sharp and relentless. "You did this, Ricky," they said, their voices low. "Confess, and it'll be easier." Davis, exhausted and confused, maintained his innocence. I didn't know her," he said, his voice hoarse. I didn't do it." The bite mark was a sticking point. Forensic dentists examined Davis's teeth, comparing them to the wound on Jane's shoulder. The results were inconclusive. The mark was too distorted to confirm a match, but police downplayed the discrepancy. Connie's testimony became the cornerstone of the case, her words carrying more weight than the lack of physical evidence. In 2005, after years of legal wrangling, Davis was charged with murder. The trial was a spectacle. The prosecution painted Davis as a predator, a man who'd stalked Jane, broken into the Hazelham home and killed her in a fit of rage. Connie took the stand, her voice trembling as she recounted Davis's alleged confession. He said he stabbed her, she whispered, avoiding eye contact. He said she screamed. The defense argued the case was flimsy. No DNA, no weapon, no witnesses placing Davis at the scene. They questioned Connie's credibility, pointing to her drug addiction and history of lying to police. But the jury, swayed by the brutality of the crime and the community's need for closure, convicted Davis. In 2006, he was sentenced to 16 years to life. As he was led from the courtroom, Davis turned to his family, his eyes hollow. "I didn't do this," he said, his voice barely audible. Jane's family exhaled, believing justice had been served. El Dorado Hills sighed with relief, their nightmare seemingly over. But the truth was still buried, waiting for its moment to surface. Ricky Davis entered Folsom State Prison, his life reduced to a cell and a number. He was 41, his youth slipping away behind bars. He wrote letters to his mother, proclaiming his innocence, but the world outside moved on. Jane's daughter grew up, her memories of her mother fading like old photographs. The Haslams sold their home, unable to live with the ghosts. The case file gathered dust, another closed chapter in the count. But something wasn't right. The bite mark nagged at a few persistent investigators. In the early 2000s, DNA technology had advanced, offering new ways to revisit old evidence. The El Dorado County Sheriff's Office, spurred by a cold case unit, re-examined Jane's file. The bite mark, preserved in photographs, was reanalyzed using modern techniques. It didn't match Davis's dental records, a fact the original investigation had glossed over. Saliva traces, collected from the wound but never tested, were sent to a lab. The results were stunning. The DNA belonged to someone else. In 2014, the Innocence Project took up Davis's case. The nonprofit dedicated to exonerating the wrongly convicted saw red flags. Connie's coerced testimony, the lack of physical evidence, the rushed investigation. They dug deeper, retesting every scrap of evidence from the crime scene. Blood stains on Jane's clothing, a hair found under her body, the saliva, all pointed to a single male profile, and it wasn't Ricky Davis. The breakthrough came in 2019. The DNA matched Michael Green, a man who'd been 17 at the time of the murder. Green was no stranger to police. By 2019, he was in his 50s with a long record of petty crimes, burglary, assault, drug possession. In 1985, he'd lived in El Dorado Hills, a troubled teen known for breaking into homes. He'd never been a suspect, his name absent from the original investigation, but the DNA was undeniable, a genetic fingerprint that placed him at the scene. Police tracked Green to a trailer park in Sacramento. When confronted, he crumbled, his face paling as detectives laid out the evidence. "I ain't mean to kill her," he said, his voice shaking. His confession unraveled the truth. On that August evening, Green had broken into the Hazelham home, expecting it to be empty. He was looking for cash, jewelry, anything he could sell. Jane, finishing her work, surprised him. Panicked, Green grabbed a kitchen knife and attacked, stabbing her in a blind frenzy. The bite mark, he admitted, was a moment of rage as Jane fought back. He fled, leaving her to die, assuming no one would connect a teenage delinquent to the crime. Green's confession was a bombshell. It not only implicated him, but exposed the flaws in the original investigation. Connie Dahl, now sober, recanted her testimony, admitting police had pressured her to lie. "They told me what to say," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "I was scared." The detectives, eager to close the case, had ignored inconsistencies, focusing on Davis to appease a grieving town. In February 2020, Ricky Davis walked free. After 14 years in prison, he stood outside the courthouse, his hair gray, his eyes squinting against the sunlight. "I never stopped believing," he said, his voice steady. His family embraced him, tears streaming. But the reunion was bittersweet. Davis had lost his 20s and 30s, his relationships, his trust in the system. He returned to a world that had moved on without him, a stranger in his own life. Michael Green was arrested the same year. In 2022, he pleaded guilty to murder, receiving a sentence of 15 years to life. At 54, he faced the rest of his days behind bars, his confession a belated reckoning. "I'm sorry," he said at sentencing, his words hollow to Jane's family. They sat in the courtroom, their grief reignited by the truth. "We thought we had justice," Jane's sister said, her voice trembling. "All those years, we were wrong." El Dorado Hills has never fully recovered. The case exposed the fragility of justice, the cost of rushing to judgment. The Hazel home, now owned by a new family, carries a quiet stigma. its walls whispering of tragedy. Jane's daughter, now in her 30s, rarely speaks of her mother, the pain too raw. She visits her grave, leaving flowers, her silence a testament to a loss that time can't heal. The broader impact of the case resonates. Davis's exoneration, one of hundreds facilitated by the Innocence Project, sparked calls for reform in California's justice system. Prosecutors faced scrutiny for their reliance on shaky testimony, their failure to pursue DNA testing sooner. Advocacy groups pushed for mandatory DNA analysis in murder cases, citing Jane's case as a cautionary tale. The changes came slowly, but they bear her name, a legacy forged in tragedy. What drove Michael Green to such violence? Was it panic? A teenager's fear of getting caught? Was it rage? A spark ignited by Jane's resistance? Or was it something darker, a seed of cruelty that grew with time? Psychologists point to impulsivity, to a young man shaped by instability and entitlement. But explanations don't soothe the pain. They don't bring back Jane. And what of Ricky Davis? He lives quietly now, rebuilding in a world that wronged him. He speaks of forgiveness, but his eyes betray the scars. "I lost everything," he said in a rare interview, "but I'm still here." His resilience is a quiet triumph, a refusal to let injustice define him. In El Dorado Hills, the sun still sets over tidy lawns, the streets still hum with the rhythm of suburban life, but the memory of Jane Anker Hilton lingers, a reminder that even the safest places can hide darkness. The case is a wound, reopened by the truth, its lessons etched in the community's soul. Justice, it seems, is a fragile thing, easily lost, hard won, and never quite complete. And somewhere in the golden light of a California evening, Jane's spirit remains. She whispers through the trees, her voice soft but unbroken. She asks for her daughter, for her town, for the man who bore her burden. She asks why justice took so long, why the wrong man paid, why her light was snuffed out. Her questions echo, unanswered. A haunting refrain in the stillness of the night. Part 7, The Pawn Shop Murders, Hawkin-Smith. Danville, Kentucky, September 2013. The morning dawned crisp and golden, the kind of autumn day that makes a small town feel timeless. Danville, nestled in the heart of Boyle County, was a place of charm and tradition. Its main street lined with brick storefronts, its people bound by church suppers and high school football games. The ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop, tucked between a diner and a hardware store, was a hub of local life. Customers came to pawn jewelry, buy used guitars, or swap stories with the owners, Michael and Angie Hawkin-Smith. The couple, married for over a decade, had built a business on trust, their warmth as much a draw as their inventory. But on that fateful morning, a shadow fell over Danville, one that would leave the town forever changed. This is the story of Michael and Angie Hawkin-Smith, whose lives were woven into the fabric of their community. This is the story of Dan Smith, a customer caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is the story of a 9-year-old boy whose courage became a beacon in the darkness, and a killer who hid behind a mask of faith. Michael Hawkin-Smith was 35, a bear of a man with a quick laugh and a knack for fixing anything: watches, rifles, broken dreams. Angie, 34, was his perfect counterpart. Sharp-witted, compassionate, the one who kept the books and the customers smiling. Together, they'd turned the pawn shop into more than a business. It was a gathering place, a refuge for those down on their luck. Their son Andrew was 9, a bright-eyed boy who loved comic books and helping his parents at the shop after school. The Hawkin-Smiths were Danville's own, their lives a testament to hard work and love. Dan Smith, 54, was a regular at the shop, a retired mechanic who'd pawned tools and bought fishing gear. He was a quiet man, his gruff exterior hiding a kind heart. On that September morning, he stopped by to browse, unaware that his visit would be his last. Passion hit the pawn shop open at 9 a.m., its bell jingling as Michael flipped the sign to open. Angie was behind the counter, sorting a tray of gold rings, while Andrew played in the back room, his Spider-Man comics spread out on a table. Dan Smith arrived around 10, chatting with Michael about a used shotgun in the display case. The morning was routine, the air filled with the familiar hum of small-town life. But at 10:17 a.m., everything changed. A 911 call shattered the morning's calm. The voice on the line was small, trembling, but resolute. A child's voice barely holding together. "They're dead," he whispered. "My parents, they're dead. Someone shot them." The dispatcher, her heart racing, tried to keep him calm. "Who's this, honey? Where are you?" The boy, his breath hitching, answered, "I'm Andrew. I'm at the pawn shop. Please, hurry." Police raced to the scene, their sirens cutting through Danville's quiet streets. They arrived to a nightmare. Inside the pawn shop, Michael Hawkin-Smith lay slumped near the counter, his body riddled with bullet wounds. Angie was crumpled beside him, her hand still clutching a ring, blood pooling beneath her. Dan Smith was near the door, his eyes wide as if frozen in shock, his chest pierced by gunfire. The shop was chaos. Glass shattered, display cases overturned, cash and jewelry scattered. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy, a grim reminder of the violence that had erupted. Andrew was found in the back room, curled behind a stack of boxes, his face pale but his eyes alert. He'd heard the shot, seen the gunman, and hidden, his instincts saving his life. "He had a gun," Andrew whispered to the first officer, his voice barely audible. "He was mad." The boy's courage stunned the police. He'd stayed silent, dialed 911 and waited, knowing help was coming, but the trauma of what he'd witnessed was etched into his small frame, a burden no child should carry. Danville was plunged into grief and fear. A triple murder in the heart of town? The pawn shop, once a place of laughter, was now a crime scene, its windows dark, its door taped shut. The community gathered outside, leaving flowers and candles, their prayers mingling with tears. Michael and Angie were beloved, their deaths a personal loss to everyone who'd known them. Dan Smith, a quiet fixture, was mourned as a neighbor, his life cut short by senseless violence. Andrew, now an orphan, became the town's collective responsibility, his bravery a light in the darkness. Police worked frantically to piece together the crime. The scene suggested a robbery gone wrong. Cash was missing, jewelry strewn about, but the brutality pointed to something deeper. 7 shell casings, all from a .40 caliber handgun, littered the floor. The shots were precise, aimed to kill, not to wound. Witnesses reported a man leaving the shop just after 10 a.m., his face obscured by a baseball cap, his stride hurried but calm. A grainy security camera from the diner next door captured a figure matching the description, but the image was too blurry to identify. Investigators turned to Andrew, their hearts heavy at the task. In a quiet room at the police station with a counselor by his side, the boy recounted what he'd seen. He was tall, Andrew said, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. He was yelling at Dad, something about money. Then he shot them. Andrew's description was vivid. A man in his 40s, wearing a dark jacket, his voice familiar, like someone he'd heard before. He went to our church, Andrew added, his words sending a chill through the room. The mention of church narrowed the focus. Danville was a tight-knit community, its church is the heartbeat of social life. Police cross-referenced Andrew's description with the Hawkin-Smith's congregation at First Baptist, a modest brick building where Michael and Angie had been active members. One name surfaced, 16 surfaced. Kenneth Allen Keith. Heath was 42, a pastor at a small church in nearby Harrodsburg, a man known for his fiery sermons and community involvement. But Keith had a past tied to the pawn shop. Years earlier, he'd co-owned a similar business with Michael Hawkin-Smith, a venture that soured over financial disputes. Michael had bought Keith out in 2010, leaving bad blood. Keith believed Michael was undermining his new pawn shop, spreading rumors to drive away customers. The motive was clear: revenge, fueled by jealousy and greed. Police moved quickly. They searched Keith's home, finding a .40 caliber handgun hidden in his garage, its serial number filed off. Ballistics confirmed it was the murder weapon, the casings matching those at the scene. In Keith's truck, they found a bag of stolen jewelry, some bearing the pawn shop's tags. Phone records showed calls between Keith and Michael in the days before the murder, their conversations tense, filled with accusation. A neighbor reported seeing Keith near the pawn shop the morning of the crime, his cap pulled low. Keith was arrested on September 25th, 2013 at his church, his congregation stunned as police led him away. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice calm but his eyes darting. The interrogation was intense. Detectives laid out the evidence, the gun, the jewelry, Andrew's testimony. Keith maintained his innocence, claiming he'd been at home preparing a sermon, but his alibi unraveled. His wife, under pressure, admitted he'd left early that morning, his mood dark. Faced with the weight of the evidence, Keith's defiance cracked, though he offered no confession. A trial in 2016 was a reckoning for Danville. The Boyle County Courthouse was packed, the air thick with grief and anger. Andrew, now 12, took the stand, his voice clear despite the weight of his loss. "I saw him," he said, pointing at Keith. "He killed my mom and dad." The courtroom was silent, the boy's words a knife to the heart. Michael's sister spoke of his generosity, Angie's mother of her daughter's compassion. Dan Smith's son, a quiet man like his father, asked for justice, his voice breaking. Prosecutors painted Keith as a man consumed by resentment, his faith a mask for greed. The gun, the jewelry, the motive, it all pointed to premeditation. The defense argued the evidence was circumstantial, Andrew's testimony clouded by trauma. They suggested an unknown robber, a random act of violence, but the jury saw through the lies. Keith's history with Michael, his financial struggles, his presence near the scene, it was too much to ignore. In a stunning turn, Keith pleaded guilty on the eve of the verdict, sparing Andrew a cross-examination. In March 2017, he was sentenced to life without parole for 3 counts of murder. He stood impassive as the judge spoke, his pastoral robes replaced by an orange jumpsuit. You betrayed your faith, your community, and this boy, the judge said, his voice sharp. Keith offered no apology, his silence a final act of defiance. Danville struggled to heal. The pawn shop remained closed, its sign faded, its windows boarded. Andrew, raised by his aunt, became the town's son, his resilience a source of pride. He spoke at schools, sharing his story to inspire others, though the pain never faded. I miss them every day, he said at a memorial. By a C-16 memorial, his voice steady. The community rallied, creating a scholarship in his parents' name, a legacy of their kindness. The Hawkin-Smith case exposed the fragility of trust in small towns, where grudges can fester unseen. It sparked debates about gun laws, the .40 caliber a reminder of their deadly power. Keith's fall from grace, a pastor-turned-killer, shook the church, prompting soul-searching about hypocrisy and forgiveness. What drove Kenkton Keith to murder? Was it pride, the wound of losing his business? Was it greed, the lure of stolen gold? Or was it a darkness that even faith couldn't tame? Psychologists point to narcissism, to a man who saw himself above consequences. But answers don't heal the scars. They don't bring back Michael, Angie, or Dan. In Danville, the seasons turn, the main street shops bustle, but the pawn shop's shadow lingers. Andrew, now a young man, carries his parents' spirit. Michael's strength, Angie's heart. The town honors them with a yearly vigil, candles glowing where they fell. And somewhere in the crisp Kentucky air, their voices whisper. To Andrew, to Danville, to the world, they ask for love, for justice, for a community that holds tight to its own. Their story is a wound, a lesson, a light that burns eternal. Part 8, Jodi's Law, Jodi Sanderholm. Arkansas City, Kansas, January 5, 2007. The winter air was sharp, the streets of this small college town dusted with frost. Arkansas City, known as Ark City to its 12,000 residents, was a place of quiet pride. Its brick buildings and tree-lined avenues evoking a simpler time. Cowley County Community College was the heart of the town, its campus alive with students chasing dreams. Among them was Jodi Sanderholm, a 19-year-old whose energy lit up every room. But on that cold January day, a shadow fell over Ark City, one that would steal a life, shake a community, and spark a legacy that endures. This is the story of Jodi Sanderholm, a young woman whose spirit burned bright. This is the story of Justin Thurber, a predator whose obsession turned deadly. This is the story of a town that fought for justice and a law that bears Jodi's name, a beacon for those stalked by darkness. Jodi Sanderholm was a force of nature. At 19, she was a sophomore at Cowley College, majoring in education with dreams of teaching kindergarten. Her smile was infectious, her laugh a melody that drew people close. Jodi was a dancer, her performances with the college's Tigerette dance team the highlight of football games. She moved with grace, her blonde hair catching the stadium lights, her confidence a quiet strength. Off the field, she was a friend, a sister, a daughter, loyal, compassionate, the kind of person who'd drop everything to help. Her family, parents Cindy and Brian, older sister Jennifer, was her anchor, their home, a haven of love and laughter. Jodi's life was full, but not without shadows. For months, she'd felt uneasy, a prickling sense of being watched. Friends noticed her glancing over her shoulder, her usual ease replaced by a subtle tension. She'd mentioned a man, a stranger who'd linger at her dance practices, his eyes fixed on her, his presence unsettling. "He gives me the creeps," she told a teammate, her voice light but her brow furrowed. Jodi didn't know his name, but she's seen him too often, his gaze too intense to be harmless. That man was Justin Thurber. Thurber was 22, a local with a troubled past, raised in Ark City. He'd been a loner, his high school years marked by petty crimes and a reputation for volatility. By 2007, he was adrift, jobless, living in a rundown apartment, his days spent wandering the town. Thurber had a history of fixation, his attention latching onto women who caught his eye. Jodi, with her vibrancy and visibility, became his obsession. He'd watch her at college events, his car idling near the dance studio, his presence a silent threat. To Thurber, Jodi wasn't a person, she was a prize, a fantasy he felt entitled to claim. On January 5th, Jodi's day began like any other. She attended classes, then headed to dance practice, her gym bag slung over her shoulder. Around 4 p.m., she left the studio, texting her mom to say she'd be home for dinner. Her silver Pontiac Grand Am was parked nearby, its keys jingling as she unlocked it. But Jodi never made it home. By 6 p.m., Cindy Sanderholm was worried. Jodi was punctual, her phone always on. Calls went to voicemail, texts unanswered. Brian drove to the college, searching the parking lot, his heart sinking when he found Jodi's car, unlocked, keys in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat. The Sanderholms called police, their voices trembling with fear. Ark City, a town where everyone knew Jodi, rallied. Friends, neighbors, and students joined the search, their flashlights cutting through the winter dusk. For 5 days, the town held its breath. Flyers with Jodi's photo, smiling, radiant, plastered every storefront, every telephone pole. Volunteers combed fields, checked alleys, prayed for a miracle. The media descended, their cameras a harsh spotlight on Ark City's grief. Cindy and Brian appeared on local news, their faces drawn, pleading for their daughter's return. "She's out there," Cindy said, clutching a photo of Jodi. "Please, help us find her." On January 10, the search ended in tragedy. A volunteer scouring the Call Wildlife Area, remote preserve 10 miles from town, found a body in a shallow ditch. It was Jodi, her clothes torn, her body battered. She'd been strangled, her neck bruised by the force of her killer's hands. Defensive wounds marked her arms, a testament to her fight. The scene was grim, the frost clinging to her like a shroud. Ark City wept, their golden girl stolen in the prime of her life. Police moved with urgency. The wildlife area, a sprawling expanse of marsh and scrub, offered few clues. No footprints, no tire tracks, the ground frozen hard. But Jodi's car was a gold mine. Inside, investigators found a single hair, dark and coarse, on the driver's seat. Fibers caught in the seatbelt didn't match Jodi's clothing. A partial fingerprint, smudged but viable, was lifted from the door handle. The evidence was sent for analysis, the town holding its breath for answers. Suspicion fell on Justin Thurber almost immediately. Jodi's teammates reported his creepy behavior, his loitering at practices, his attempts to talk to her, his car circling the campus. A friend recalled seeing him near the dance studio the day Jodi vanished, his expression blank but his eyes intense. Police tracked Thurber to his apartment, a cluttered space that reeked of stale beer and neglect. When questioned, he was evasive, his hands fidgeting. "I don't know her," he said, his voice flat, "never met her." But his alibi was weak. He claimed he'd been home, alone, with no one to confirm it. The evidence tightened the noose. The hair in Jodi's car matched Thurber's DNA, extracted from a discarded cigarette. The fibers were traced to a jacket in his closet, its weave identical to those found on the seatbelt. The fingerprint, though partial, was a 90% match to his left thumb. Police searched the wildlife area again, guided by Thurber's known haunts. They found a torn piece of Jodi's dance uniform, caught in a thorn bush, its fibers linking back to Thurber's jacket. The case was airtight, a testament to forensic science and relentless police work. Thurber was arrested on January 15, 2007, his face pale as handcuffs snapped around his wrists. The interrogation was a study in denial. "You got the wrong guy," he said, his voice rising. Detectives laid out the evidence, the DNA, the fibers, the witnesses. Thurber's bravado crumbled, but he stopped short of a confession. "Prove it," he spat, his eyes darting to the door. The trial in 2009 was a crucible for Ark City. The Cali County Courthouse was packed, the air thick with grief and rage. Jodi's family filled the front rows, their faces etched with pain. Cindy clutched a locket with Jodi's photo, Brian's arm around her. Jennifer staring at Thurber with quiet fury. The prosecution built a meticulous case, painting Thurber as a predator whose obsession escalated to murder. They detailed his stalking, weeks of watching Jodi, his car parked near her routes, his presence at her events, the DNA, the fibers, the fingerprint. It was overwhelming. The most harrowing testimony came from a forensic pathologist. Jodi, he said, had fought fiercely, her nails tearing at her attacker's skin, her body bruised from resisting. She didn't go quietly, he said, his voice steady. The courtroom wept. Jodi's strength, a bittersweet comfort. A teammate spoke of her kindness, her dreams of teaching, her ability to make everyone feel seen. She was our light, she said, her voice breaking. Thurber's defense was desperate. His attorneys argued the evidence was circumstantial, the DNA contaminated, the witnesses mistaken. They painted Jodi's death as a random act, a tragedy with no clear culprit. But the jury saw through the lies. Thurber's behavior, his history, the forensic links, it was too much to dismiss. On March 12, 2009, the verdict came. Guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. The sentencing phase was tense. Kansas hadn't executed anyone since 1965, but Jodi's case demanded the maximum penalty. The Sanderholms spoke, their voices raw. "You took our future," Cindy said, staring at Thurber. "You took her from us." The jury deliberated for hours, their faces grim. In the end, they chose death, a rare sentence that reflected the crime's brutality. Thurber showed no remorse, his eyes cold as the gavel fell. He was sent to El Dorado Correctional Facility, his execution pending appeals, but in 2021, a twist emerged. A psychological evaluation questioned his mental competency, citing possible schizophrenia. The Kansas Supreme Court stayed his sentence, ordering further tests. As of 2025, Thurber remains on death row, his fate uncertain, the delay a fresh wound for Jodi's family. Park City has never been the same. Jodi's absence is a void. Her dance team retired her number. Her classmates created a scholarship in her name. The college campus, once vibrant, feels quieter, its students more cautious. The wildlife area, where Jodi was found, is avoided, its trails overgrown, its silence heavy. The case sparked a movement. Jodi's family, led by Cindy, channeled their grief into advocacy. They pushed for stronger stalking laws, arguing that police needed more power to intervene before obsession turned deadly. In 2008, Kansas passed Jodi's Law, expanding definitions of stalking and allowing quicker protective orders. The law has saved lives, its impact a testament to Jodi's legacy. Hub. She's still protecting people, Brian said at a memorial, his voice thick with pride. What drove Justin Thurber to murder? Was it obsession? A fantasy he couldn't let go? Was it entitlement? A belief he deserved Jodi's life? Or was it a darkness that no diagnosis can explain? Psychologists point to fixation, to a mind warped by rejection and control, but answers don't heal. They don't bring back Jodi. The Sanderholms carry on, their home filled with Jodi's photos, smiling at a dance recital, hugging her sister, laughing with friends. They speak of her often, keeping her spirit alive. "She's with us," Cindy says, touching her locket. Jennifer, now a mother, named her daughter Jodi, a tribute to the aunt she'll never meet. In Arkansas City, the winters are still sharp, the college still hums with life, but Jodi's story lingers, a reminder of what was lost and what was gained. Her law, her memory, her light. They endure, a shield against the shadows, and somewhere in the frost-kissed fields of Kansas, Jodi's spirit dances. She moves through the wind, her laughter faint but unbroken. She asks for her family, for her town, for those still stalked by fear. Her question echoes, soft and eternal. Why did her light have to fade when it burned so bright? Part 9, The Farm of Death. Sheila LaBarre. Eppin, New Hampshire, 2006. The rolling hills of Rockingham County stretch wide under a gray spring sky, their beauty a quiet promise of peace. Tucked among these hills was a 115-acre farm, its white farmhouse and red barns a postcard of rural charm. To the people of Eppin, a small town of 6-0, the farm was a landmark, its fields home to grazing horses and bleating sheep. But Beneath its idyllic surface, the farm hid a darkness so profound it would shock the nation. The woman who owned it, Sheila LaBarre, was no farmer. She was a predator, her home a trap, her fields a graveyard. Hey, this is the story of Sheila LaBarre, a woman whose pain twisted into cruelty. This is the story of Michael Delorge and Kenneth County, men who walked into her web and never walked out. This is a story of a town that learned monsters don't always lurk in shadows. They can smile, charm, and invite you in. Sheila LaBarre was 48 in 2006, a striking woman with sharp features and a commanding presence. Born in Alabama in 1958, her childhood was a crucible of abuse, physical, emotional, sexual. Her father, a volatile man, ruled the home with fists. Her mother, broken by his cruelty, offered no refuge. Sheila learned early that the world was a place of pain, and she carried that lesson into adulthood. By her 20s, she'd fled to New Hampshire, reinventing herself. As a woman of means, she married into wealth, inheriting the Epping farm after her husband's death in the 1980s. To neighbors, she was eccentric but charismatic, a businesswoman who bred horses, dabbled in real estate, and spoke with a southern drawl that disarmed. But Sheila was unraveling. Her trauma, unaddressed and festering, had warped her mind. She saw enemies everywhere, men in particular, whom she believed were out to harm her. Her paranoia was fueled by delusions, her anger a simmering force. Sheila began placing personal ads in newspapers, seeking companions to live on her farm. The ads were bait, luring vulnerable men, drifters, loners, those with nowhere else to go. To them, Sheila offered a dream, a home, a job, a chance at love. To Sheila, they were prey. Michael Delorge was 38, a soft-spoken man from Massachusetts. A veteran with a history of mental health struggles, he drifted through life, his savings depleted, his family distant. In 2005, he answered Sheila's ad, drawn by her promise of work and companionship. Kenneth County 24 was a different story. A bright young man from North Carolina, his life derailed by addiction. In 2006, he too found Sheila's ad, seeing her farm as a fresh start. Both men arrived in Epping, their bags packed with hope. Neither would leave. The farm was Sheila's domain, a kingdom where she ruled with absolute control. The men who came to her, Michael, Kenneth, and others before them, were put to work, tending animals, repairing fences, their days grueling under her watchful eye. Sheila was charming at first, her flirtations a lure, but her mood could shift in an instant, her voice turning sharp, her accusations wild. She'd scream that they were pedophiles, abusers, devils sent to destroy her. Her paranoia was a trap, her rage a weapon. The horror began to surface in March 2006. A local woman, Lynn Nugent, called police, her voice trembling with concern. Her son, Kenneth County, had been living at Sheila's farm for weeks, but his calls had stopped. Something's wrong, Lynn said. He sounded scared last time we talked. Epping police, familiar with Sheila's odd reputation, visited the farm. Sheila was cooperative, her smile practiced. Kenny left, she said, shrugging. Said he was heading to Florida, but her story was thin, her eyes evasive. Officers noted the farm's disarray. Trash piled high, animals neglected, a strange smell lingering near the barn. A week later, a tip from a neighbor pushed the investigation forward. The neighbor had seen Sheila burning something in a pit behind the farmhouse, the flames high, the smoke acrid. It didn't smell like wood, he said, his voice uneasy. Police returned with a warrant, their boots crunching on the farm's gravel drive. What they found was a descent into nightmare. In the burn pit, investigators uncovered human remains, bone fragments, teeth, charred tissue. A femur, scorched but intact, bore signs of dismemberment. Nearby, a pig pen held more horrors, bone shards mixed with manure, as if Sheila had fed her victims to the animals. Inside the farmhouse, the scene was chaos. Bloodstains, faint but unmistakable, dotted the walls. A closet held ropes, knives, and a bloodied hammer. A notebook, written in Sheila's jagged scrawl, detailed her punishments. Torture sessions, she claimed, were justice for the men's sin. The remains were identified through dental records and DNA. Kenneth County, his body burned and scattered, was the primary victim. Michael DeLorge, missing since 2005, was linked to bone fragments in the pig pen, his death confirmed, but his body too destroyed for a full accounting. Police suspected other victims. Men who'd answered Sheila's ads over the years, but the evidence was scarce, the farm's vastness a barrier. Sheila was arrested on April 1, 2006, as she tried to flee Epping in a pickup truck. Her demeanor was defiant, her voice laced with venom. They deserved it, she spat at officers. They were monsters. In custody, she rambled about conspiracies, claiming the men were part of a plot to ruin her. Her words were a chilling mix of delusion and calculation, her mind a labyrinth of trauma and rage. The investigation deepened. Neighbors came forward, their stories painting a picture of a woman unraveling. They'd heard screams from the farm at night, seen men arrive, but never leave. One recalled Sheila bragging about getting rid of trash. Her laugh sharp and unsettling. A former farmhand described her cruelty, whipping workers, locking them in sheds. Her punishments escalating with her paranoia. Audio tapes found in the farmhouse were the most damning. Sheila had recorded her victims' screams, her voice taunting them as they begged. "You're nothing," she'd say, her tone gleeful. "No one will miss you." The trial in 2008 was a spectacle that gripped New Hampshire. The Rockingham County courthouse was packed, the air heavy with disbelief. Epping, a town that prided itself on community, struggled to reconcile the Sheila they'd known, charming, quirky, with the monster on trial. Kenneth County's mother, Lynn, took the stand, her voice trembling but resolute. "He was my boy," she said, clutching a photo of Kenneth smiling. "She took him from me." Michael DeLorge, his sister, spoke of his kindness, his struggle to find peace. "He trusted her," she said, tears falling. That was his mistake. Prosecutors built a meticulous case. Sheila, they argued, was a serial killer, her farm a death trap for the vulnerable, the bones, the tapes, the bloodstains. It was overwhelming. They played the recordings, the courtroom recoiling as Kenneth's screams filled the air, Sheila's laughter a chilling counterpoint. A forensic anthropologist detailed the dismemberment, the burning, the pigs, a methodical effort to erase her crimes. "She didn't just kill," the prosecutor said. "She erased them." Sheila's defense was a gamble. Her attorneys argued insanity, citing her childhood abuse, her documented mental illness, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, PTSD. A psychiatrist testified to her delusions, her belief that she was avenging her own pain by punishing evil men. "She's not a monster," the defense said. "She's a victim, broken by a lifetime of trauma." But the jury saw through the narrative. Sheila's crimes were calculated, her disposal methods deliberate. Insanity didn't explain the tapes, the glee in her voice, the years of luring men to their deaths. Sheila took the stand, a rare move that electrified the courtroom. Her testimony was a performance. Tears one moment, rage the next. "They were going to hurt me," she said, her eyes wild. "I had to stop them." She spoke of her childhood, her father's fists, her mother's silence, but her words rang hollow, her victimhood a shield that crumbled under cross-examination. "You enjoyed it, didn't you?" the prosecutor asked, holding up a tape. Sheila smirked, then caught herself, her silence damning. The jury deliberated for 2 days. On June 20, 2008, they returned guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder for Kenneth County and Michael DeLorge. The sentence was life without parole, a rare penalty in New Hampshire where the death penalty was reserved for the most heinous crimes. Sheila showed no emotion as the gavel fell, her eyes fixed on the wall, as if already retreating into her own world. Epping was left to pick up the pieces. The farm, once a symbol of rural beauty, was razed, its fields left fallow, its barns demolished. The town grappled with guilt. How had they missed the signs? Neighbors who'd waved at Sheila, bought her eggs, now questioned their judgment. The church where she'd occasionally prayed held a service for the victims, its pews filled with those seeking forgiveness for their blind. The families of Kenneth and Michael carried the heaviest burden. Lynn County moved away, unable to bear Epping's memory. She kept Kenneth's photo on her mantle, his smile, a reminder of the son she'd lost. Michael's sister, a nurse, dedicated her career to helping veterans, honoring her brother's struggle. Both spoke of their loved ones not as victims, but as men with stories, dreams, lives stolen by a woman who saw them as disposable. The broader impact of the case rippled. Sheila's crimes exposed the vulnerability of transient men, those who slip through society's cracks. Advocacy groups in New Hampshire pushed for better tracking of missing persons, citing the unknown victims who may lie in Sheila's fields. The case also sparked debates about mental illness and crime. Could treatment have stopped Sheila, or was her darkness inevitable? The farm became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil can hide behind a smile, a neighbor, a familiar face. What drove Sheila LaBarre to such cruelty? Was it her trauma, a childhood of abuse that twisted her into a monster? Was it madness, a mind fractured by delusions? Or was it choice, a woman who embraced her power to destroy? Psychologists point to a perfect storm: trauma, mental illness, a need for control. But explanations don't erase the horror. They don't bring back Kenneth, Michael, or the others who may rest in unmarked graves. Sheila remains in a New Hampshire prison, her days spent in isolation, her notoriety a burden. She writes letters, claiming innocence, her words a mix of delusion and defiance. But the world has moved on. Her farm, a memory, her name a curse. In Epping, the hills are quieter now, the fields empty. The town holds its secrets close, its trust tempered by the knowledge that darkness can take root anywhere. And somewhere, in the soft rustle of New Hampshire spring, the spirits of Kenneth and Michael linger. They whisper through the grass, their voices faint but unbroken. They ask for their families, for the town that failed them, for the men who came before and after. Their question echoes, heavy and eternal. Why did a place so full of life become a farm of death? Part 10, The Weight of Secrets, Bobo Bay. Parsons, Tennessee, April 13th, 2011. The morning broke soft and warm, the woods surrounding Darden Road alive with the hum of spring. Parsons, a small town of 2,400 in Decatur County, was a place where time seemed to pause. Its rolling hills dotted with farms, its people bound by faith and familiarity. The Bobo family home, a modest house nestled among pine and oak, was a haven for Holly Bobo, a 20-year-old nursing student whose light touched everyone she met. But on that April morning, a darkness crept into Parsons, stealing a daughter, shattering a community, and leaving a mystery that would haunt the South for years. This is the story of Holly Bobo, a young woman whose kindness defined her. This is the story of Zach Adams and his circle, men whose secrets fueled a tragedy. This is the story of a town that searched, grieved, and fought for truth, only to find that the answers were closer than they ever imagined. Holly Bobo was a beacon. At 20, she was in her second year at the University of Tennessee's nursing program, her compassion a perfect fit for her chosen path. Blonde, petite, with a smile that could melt hearts, Holly was beloved by her parents, Karen and Dana, by her older brother, Clint, by her friends at church and school. She sang in the choir, her voice a gentle alto that lifted hymns to the rafters. She loved country music, her weekends spent line dancing at local fairs, her laughter infectious. Holly was the girl next door, but more. She was Parsons' pride, a symbol of hope in a town where opportunities were scarce. On April 13, Holly woke early, her day packed with studying for a nursing exam. She was up by 4 a.m., her textbooks spread across the kitchen table, a cup of coffee steaming beside her. By 7:30, she was ready to leave, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her phone buzzing with a text from her boyfriend, Drew Scott. Karen was in the kitchen, packing Holly's lunch when they shared a quick hug. "Love you, mama," Holly said, her voice bright. Karen smiled, watching her daughter step outside, unaware it would be the last time she'd see her. At 7:50 IEM, a scream pierced the morning quiet. Clint Bobo, still half asleep in his room, jolted upright. He ran to the window, his heart racing, and saw Holly in the carport kneeling beside a man in camouflage. At first, Clint thought it was Drew, maybe an argument or a prank. But something was wrong. The man's posture was tense, his voice low and urgent. Holly's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. Clint grabbed his phone, dialing 911 as he watched the man lead Holly toward the woods behind the house. "She's being taken," he told the dispatcher, his voice shaking. "Hurry, please." Police arrived within minutes, their sirens a jarring note in Parsons' stillness. The carport held a grim clue, a small pool of blood, later confirmed as Holly's. Her lunch bag lay abandoned, its contents spilled across the pavement. Footprints, muddied and faint, trailed into the woods, but they vanished in the underbrush. The Bobo family was frantic. Karen collapsed sobbing, Dana pacing, Clint replaying the scene in his mind. tortured by what he had. The town rallied, their shock turning to action. By noon, hundreds of volunteers, neighbors, churchgoers, students were combing the woods, calling Holly's name. For weeks, Parsons became a search party. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their blades chopping the air. Bloodhounds sniffed through creeks and thickets, their handlers grim-faced. Flyers with Holly's photo smiling in her nursing scrubs blanketed West Tennessee, her face on every gas station window, every diner bulletin board. The media descended, their cameras a constant presence, amplifying the town's grief. Karen and Dana appeared on national news, their voices raw but resolute. "She's out there," Karen said, clutching Holly's favorite scarf. "We won't stop until we find her." The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, took charge, their resources stretched thin by the case's complexity. Early leads pointed to a stranger, a drifter, a predator passing through. Holly's phone, found miles away in a ditch, offered no clues. Its data was wiped by rain. Her purse, discovered in a creek, held only soggy papers, no fingerprints. The blood in the carport suggested a struggle, but without a body. Police couldn't confirm murder. Theories swirled. Abduction, human trafficking, a random act of violence. Parsons, a town where everyone knew everyone, began to look at itself with suspicion. Months turned to years. The search never waning, but the hope fading. Volunteers dwindled, their lives reclaiming them. The Bobos clung to faith, their church a refuge where they prayed for Holly's return. Clint, haunted by guilt, withdrew, his silence a shield against the pain. The media moved on, the headlines fading, but Holly's face remained. On billboards, on t-shirts, a constant reminder of a daughter lost. In 2014, a breakthrough came, but it was grim. A ginseng hunter deep in the woods near Holiday, 10 miles from Parsons, found a human skull. Dental records confirmed it was Holly Bobo. Her remains scattered by animals, her body too decomposed to determine cause of death. The discovery crushed Parsons, their fragile hope replaced by mourning. Karen collapsed at the news, Dana holding her as they wept. "We wanted her home," Dana said, his voice hollow. "Not like this." The TBI shifted focus to murder. The skull bore signs of trauma, a fracture suggesting a blow to the head. The woods where Holly was found were near a property linked to Zach Adams, a 29-year-old local with a troubled past. Adams was no stranger to police. His rap sheet included theft, assault, and drug charges. Raised in Parsons, he'd spiraled into addiction, his life a cycle of meth and petty crime. By 2011, he ran with a rough crowd. His brother Dylan, cousin Jason Autry, and friends Shane Austin and Mark Piercy, men known for trouble. Investigators zeroed in on Adams, their suspicions fueled by a tip. A woman, claiming to be his ex-girlfriend, said Zach had bragged about making a girl disappear. His words chillingly specific, they'll never find her. The TBI searched his property, finding nothing definitive but noting his evasiveness. "I don't know nothing," Zach said during questioning, his eyes darting. His alibi was shaky. He claimed he'd been fishing with Dylan, but Dylan's story didn't match with The case broke open in 2016 thanks to Jason Autry. Facing drug charges, Autry cut a deal offering testimony that would unravel the truth. In a recorded interview, he detailed a horrifying sequence of events. On April 13, 2011, Zach Adams, Dylan Adams, Shane Austin, and Autry were at Zach's trailer high on meth. Zach, enraged over a drug debt he believed Holly's boyfriend owed, hatched a plan to send a message. He knew Holly's routine, her early mornings, her isolated home. Armed with a .22 rifle, Zach and Shane drove to the Bobo property, waiting for Holly to emerge. Autry's account was harrowing. As Zach confronted Holly in the carport, demanding money, his rifle raised. When she resisted, he struck her, drawing blood. Panicked, he forced her into the woods, Shane trailing behind. At the trailer, the men assaulted her, their actions fueled by drugs and rage. Holly, fighting until the end, was killed. "A blow to the head," Autry said, though he didn't see it. Zach and Dylan disposed of her body, dumping it in the Holiday woods, assuming the remote location would hide their crime. Autry's testimony was corroborated by physical evidence. A .22 bullet casing found near the Bobo home matched a rifle owned by Zach. Fibers in his truck bed were consistent with Holly's clothing. Dylan, under pressure, confessed to helping move the body, his account aligning with Autry's. Shane Austin, facing charges, committed suicide in 2015, his death a silent admission. The TBI built a case, their evidence a net closing around Zach Adams. The trial in 2017 was a crucible for Parsons. The Hardin County Courthouse was packed, the air thick with grief and anticipation. The Bobos sat in the front row, Karen clutching Holly's scarf, Dana's jaw tight. Zach Adams, now 33, sat shackled, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow from years of addiction. The prosecution laid out a meticulous case. Autry's testimony, the centerpiece. "He said she'd never be found," Autry said, his voice steady despite the courtroom's tension. Forensic experts linked the casing, the fibers, the skull's trauma to Zach's action. The defense fought back, arguing Autry's deal tainted his credibility. "He's a liar, saving himself," they said, pointing to inconsistencies in his timeline. They questioned the lack of DNA, the absence of Holly's body at Zach's property. But the jury, many from Parsons, knew the town's pain. Holly's friends testified to her character, her dreams of nursing, her love for her family, her unshakable faith. Clint took the stand, his voice breaking as he described the morning he lost her. "I should have stopped him," he said, tears falling. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. On September 23, 2017, they returned guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and rape. The sentencing was swift, life without parole plus 50 years. Zach showed no emotion, his eyes fixed on the floor. Karen exhaled, her hand gripping Dana's, but their relief was hollow. "He doesn't bring her back," she said outside the courthouse, her voice soft. Parsons cheered the verdict, but the town felt heavier, its innocence lost. Dylan, Adams, and Jason Autry faced lesser charge. Dylan pleaded guilty to facilitating murder, receiving 15 years. Autry, granted immunity for his testimony, walked free, his role in the crime a stain he'd carry. The case left questions. Were others involved? Did Zach act alone in the killing? The woods, silent and vast, held their secrets, offering no further clues. Parsons has changed since 2011. The Bobo home, once filled with Holly's laughter, stands quiet, its windows dark. Karen and Dana moved away, their grief too heavy for the town's memories. Clint, now in his 30s, lives privately, his guilt a constant shadow. The community honors Holly with a yearly vigil. Pink balloons, her favorite color, rising into the sky, a scholarship in her name. Supports nursing students, her dream living on in others. They sparked broader change. Holly's disappearance exposed gaps in rural policing, slow responses, limited resources. Tennessee passed Holly's Law in 2014, mandating faster Amber Alerts for missing young adults. The law has saved lives, its impact a testament to Holly's legacy. "She's still helping people," Karen said at a memorial, her voice thick with pride. What drove Zach Adams to such evil? Was it drugs? A mind warped by meth's grip? Was it rage? A grudge spiraling into violence? Or was it a darkness that no motive can explain? Psychologists point to addiction, to a life shaped by poverty and impulsivity. But answers don't heal. They don't bring back Holly. The Bobos carry her in their hearts. Karen with her scarf, Dana with her memory, Clint with his resolve to live for her. Parsons keeps her close, her face on murals, her name on lips. The woods where she was found are quieter now, their secrets buried deep. And somewhere in the warm Tennessee spring, Holly's spirit lingers. She sings through the pines, her voice soft but unbroken. She asks for a family, for her town, for the truth that took so long. Her question echoes, gentle and eternal. Why did a morning so full of promise end in a weight of secrets? And so the shadows recede, but their weight remains. 10 stories, 10 lives torn apart. 10 truths that claw at the edges of our understanding. From the quiet streets of Lititz to the frozen woods of Tennessee, we've walked through the darkness where love becomes betrayal, where trust turns to terror, where the human heart reveals its deepest flaws. These are not just tales to chill the night. They are echoes of real pain, real loss, real questions that linger unanswered. What drives a soul to such extremes? Is it greed, as cold as a winter grave? Is it rage, burning hotter than any flame? Or is it something quieter, something we all carry, a spark of darkness that waits for the right moment to ignite? The answers, like the victims, are often lost to time, buried in fields, in forests, in the silence of a town that will never be the same. Yet in the grief, there is resilience. Families who fight for justice, communities who hold their loved ones close, laws that rise from ashes to shield the vulnerable. The light endures, fragile but fierce, a reminder that even in the deepest night, hope can find a way. But as you drift towards sleep, consider this. The stories we've told are not confined to the past. They live in the choices we make, the secrets we keep, the shadows we ignore. They ask us to look closer at our neighbors, at our hearts, at the world we think we know. They ask us to remember the names Cara, Angela, Timothy, Lila, Stephanie, Alexandria, Jane, Michael, Angie, Dan, Jodi, Dawn, Kenneth, Michael, Holly, and the lives they might have lived. The darkness is vast, but so is the truth. It waits, patient and unyielding for those brave enough to seek it. Rest now if you can, but know this. The shadows are never far, and their stories are never truly done. Good night.